All right, this video is going to kind of go through just the basics of drafting in a two-dimensional series with Fusion 360. So one of the first things you're going to do is make sure that you've checked your units. You can see that over on the left-hand side. You can toggle them between whatever you want to. You can change them at different times, but it's always a good idea to have them in the units that you want to be in to start with. So I'm in my design space. My units. I have the ability to, again, adjust them now or later if I want to. For the most part, we'll be working in inches or feet. And now what I want to do is I'm going to actually create a sketch. So I need to determine which plane I want my sketch to live on. I'm going to select the plane there that pops up. And now what the Fusion will do is it'll orient my screen to be looking at a top-down view on that plane. So I'm going to start by creating a simple line. You can see as I pick a starting point, I can drag out and I can rotate up. And I can also specify a distance by typing it in. And I can specify a degree by hitting tab and then typing that in as well. So that's an easy way to start with just some basic line work by clicking and dragging. And then if you want to specify distances, you can do that as well. So I have a line that's 8 inches long and that is parallel to my bottom axis there. I can create another line. I can again make the distance that I want. I can change the angle. So now you see if I have 45 degrees, it'll lock in that dimension or angle, and then I can specify and drag out, or I can type in the number that I want to. So I have two lines now that are joined together. I can add more lines, and I can make really kind of any shape that I want just using a simple line tool. You'll see as it snaps there to the endpoint of that first line, that's important that you want those to be joined. And so you want that little square to show up will show that it will actually join those lines at the same point when you put them together. So just finishing up my rough sketch here. There's no real rhyme or reason to what I'm drawing. I'm just really kind of looking at how I can make different lines in different spaces. And then you'll see as I hover over spots, I have a midpoint, that dotted line that shows up, and I have an endpoint. So if I hover over it and then move, I'll actually be able to snap things to midpoints or endpoints pretty easily. Once I've completed and closed the shape, you can see that it shades it in, and then I hit Finish Sketch, and I can see that my sketches showed up there as Sketch 1. I can toggle the eyeballs to show or not show it down the right wall. I can make another sketch. I'm going to click the same sketch plane and just move over a little bit to get myself some more room. And I'm going to do something similar where I'm going to make a shape, but then I'm going to specify the dimensions after the fact. You can see as I am hovering over my first shape, it'll start to draw those lines to make things are collinear to a endpoint or a midpoint. So I'm just really kind of roughing out the same idea of what I had on the left-hand side, much quicker because I didn't specify any dimensions or any lengths. And what I'll do next is be able to go back through and actually specify what those dimensions are. You have these constraints at the top that you can use to make sure that things are parallel or coincident or tangent. We're not going to mess with a lot of those right now. We are going to play on the dimensions. So we hit the dimensions icon at the top, and you can see if I try to redimension something that I've already typed in a value, it over constrains it. Whereas on this one, when I try to type it in, because I didn't set a specific length, I can now make it what I want it to be. So I can adjust it after the fact. So once you've typed in a line to be 8 inches, you can't change it with the dimension tool because you've already constrained that value. But I can pull out as many dimensions as I want, and I can start to specify my length here to be whatever I would want it to be. So again, just using the dimension tool, it stays active as long as I'm using it, and I can pull those out. You can see, depending on those diagonals, which direction you pull them out, it will specify either the height or it will specify the length. And there's different instances where you're going to want to do it different ways. So you just kind of play around with how you drag it out, and you'll see how those dimensions start to be created. This last one, when I look at it and I pull it out, if I try to set it, well, because everything else is set, I can't change that dimension without changing my other dimensions. So I've constrained my shape when I've set and then it's just linear, when I've set all of those dimensions except that last line. So there we go. We're going to talk about how we select things now. So I'm going to drag and go down to the right. So this is my selection box. What you'll see is if I have different colors. So if I drag and go up, it will select anything that it's touching. If I go down to the right, it'll be anything that it actually captures the whole thing. So there's different options when I want to grab the whole thing. If I just want a part of it, I go from the bottom right to the upper left. If I want to make sure I just grab one part of it, I get it from the upper left to the bottom right. So the direction in which I drag is important to be able to select different shapes as I go through it. Okay, so we've made a couple sketches. We're going to look at some different tools now. So we have, besides a line, we have a rectangle. We have three different types of rectangles that we can draw. We can have our standard rectangle where I just specify a point and then I specify the other corner point, and I can drag it out with the dimensions, and that will create a rectangle. I can make multiple rectangles that way, and that's an easy way to create a rectangle. I can dimension those if I don't specify a value, and I can start to make my rectangle into kind of whatever shape I want with my dimension tool. I can also create a rectangle by making a center point. So if I know where the center point needs to be, I pick one point and I basically pull out from that. You'll see in a second where I can make a rectangle from the center point. This one allows me to make a rectangle with 2 points if I want something that is angled, and that's helpful if I have something that is not perpendicular up and down. If I do a center point rectangle, here we go, this one, I pull out from the middle, and I can then specify the width and the length to create a center point rectangle. And then if I want to, I can dimension that to be whatever I need it to be from there. All right, so I finished that sketch. You notice that I have different sketches that are in here. They're not labeled anything specific, but I can toggle them on and off, and then I can go back and I can either edit or I can rename it to be something that is easier to remember down the road. You have to remember that sometimes you're going to draw things and then come back to it in a month and you're not going to remember what those things were for. So labeling them with an appropriate name is very helpful. We're going to look at some of our circle options here. So I have a standard circle where I have a diameter that I set and I pull out from the middle. And then I can specify those and I can dimension them if I want to down the road by basically pulling out to some random distance and then specifying that value. And once I set that dimension, it'll adjust what the circle looks like. I can make a different variations of circles. You can play around with them all. There's different instances where you want to use them. I have from a side, right? And then I'm going to pull out a diameter from the side. Again, if I don't know where the center point needs to be, but I know where the side needs to be. I have a rectangle that I can then use to uh, create a circle. So let's say I have a circle, I have two sides, and I want it to be in the middle there. I can pull that out from the middle, and then I can start to join shapes that way. That again is snapping to the midpoint, and I pull out a circle from the midpoint of that rectangle. And then I can rename that sketch to be called circles so that it is clear when I come back and look at it down the road. All right, we'll make another sketch. Again, same sketch plane. I'm not going to get into three-dimensional space here. We're going to look at what we can do with an arc. Right, so I have an arc. I have 3 points that I can set, the two sides, and then I basically will pull up from there what I want that radius to be. Again, I don't necessarily know where the center point is with that, but I can pull out again, with those two set sides and then put those pieces in with my arc tool. There's another arc that I'm pulling off, and it's joined at the end point there. And then finally, I have that last piece, and I've made a shape using three arcs. Then again, it's closed because I've completed my shape where it's a bound shape at this point. This is where I have an arc, I have a radius, and I have a angle that I'm pulling it. So I pull that out, and then if I'm looking at like a sector of a circle, I can pull out and rotate that value to go from there. Then if I want to dimension it, right, I'll pull out and I'll be basically setting the radius for my arc if I haven't set it already. Again, once I've set that radius, I can't change it again because I've already constrained that value. All right, so one thing to notice too is we have these dashed lines, which are these construction lines. They're not actual lines that we can pull, but they help us show how the actual shape was constructed. So center point and then the arc. All right, that's it.